The Bookshelf with Ryan Tubridy is brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. Eason have a rich heritage of bookselling since 1886. In fact, it's probably where you got your first ever book, or maybe your last one, and hopefully your next one after you listen to this episode of our podcast. And stay listening for our Ryan Recommends slot, my weekly recommendation, where I'll discuss a book I've read recently that I think you'll really enjoy too. All the books we discuss on this episode of our podcast are available now in your local Eason store, or indeed order online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired. Welcome once again to The Bookshelf with me, Ryan Tubridy, and a guest whose life we will turn the pages over through the prism of just 3 books that we've asked them to pluck from their very own bookshelf. But not just any old tomes, oh no. 3 books. The book from the childhood, the book that made them cry, and the book that changed their life. Our guest today is a radio and television presenter. She is also a content creator. A what? Neither do I. And a podcast host. Her spot-on impressions of Irish personalities showcase her incredible talent for capturing the essence of modern Irish culture. A laughter enthusiast, for that is what she is. Her podcast, The Laughs of Your Life, it's become a must-listen, featuring very insightful conversations with guests, some of whom are really good and are as diverse as they are entertaining. I am delighted to welcome Doireann Garrihy to The Bookshelf. What a pleasure to see you.
What a pleasure to be a guest, Ryan. Thank you so much for thinking of me.
Before we came into studio, you kind of suggested to me that you were worried that this was going to be some class of test on the 3 books that you've chosen for us today. So
yes.
And you were almost reluctant to admit to enjoying reading, or at least you said, I'm not really a reader, and yet you've got 3 wonderful books to talk about in a second. So
I do.
What were you afraid of?
I wanted to preface the conversation by saying I don't eat books by any means.
That's okay.
I'm not a big book reader. I should be better. It's the kind of thing that my dad still at the age of 31 nags me about. He's like, you're not consuming enough. You're not going to enough art galleries. You're not doing enough cultural things, which I amn't. But I think a lot of people, maybe of my generation, can be a bit guilty of that.
Yes.
I enjoy to read a book. I enjoy an audiobook.
We're asking about 3 books that are so important in your life. Now, you've said that you're not much of a reader, so to speak, but as a kid,
yes,
everyone kind of has to be a reader because of school.
Of course.
And actually, it's like teachers are so important in life. And if you get the right teacher who teaches the right way, you get a love of reading. If you get the wrong teacher, sadly, or the wrong course,
yes,
it can drum the life and passion. It happens with history a lot, and can happen in English class. If you get the dead behind the eyes shark teacher, and then Macbeth came, and then his wife said, let's kill Duncan, then they kill. And you're going, God, but if you get it slightly Captain, my Captain, where it's like, Macbeth, it's short, it's bloody, it's fascinating, let's do it.
So
and
I had that.
So what did you have?
Oh my God. Big shout out to Mr. Murphy.
Mr. Murphy. Everyone has a really important teacher. Yours was Mr. Murphy.
Yes. So he was my English and classical studies teacher.
What a combo.
What a combo. He was also my tutor. So he was the person, you know the way a teacher's assigned to you from first year to 6th year?
Yeah.
And in our school it was that way. And they're the person you do roll with every morning.
School dad.
So he was school dad.
Yeah.
But he had just a great manner and approach, because he wasn't too there for you. But you knew that if push came to shove, he was.
Okay.
So he wouldn't go easy on you.
Yes.
But if you came in bawling, crying, he'd be very sympathetic. So, yes. Oh my God, King Lear for the Leaving Cert.
Oh, that was a hurdle. That's complicated.
I'm not joking. He would jump up and down on tables, roll on the floor, be shouting, opening windows. He was phenomenal. God. He performed the entirety
Amazing.
of King Lear in front of us, and I used to look forward to that class so much. But it helped you remember,
of course,
and understand. And like as a result, I mean, I did speech and drama from when I was 5, and so I had an appreciation for, I suppose, language and Shakespeare. I remember I did the Shakespeare Cup in 3rd year in Fesh Matthew, which is a big deal, Ryan.
I know. I'm sensing the
speech and drama
tension
world
already.
Yeah. I was Juliet. So anyway, sorry, I digress a little bit. I loved Shakespeare anyway a little bit, but he instilled this massive love. And then we were in 6th year, was it 5th year? Probably 5th year. Peak Celtic Tiger times.
Yeah.
So they were like, why don't we fly the fifth years to London to see King Lear?
Yeah, of course.
The parents were like, of course we will.
Yeah.
So we went to see King Lear in London.
Wow.
Dustin Hoffman was in the audience.
No. Can you remember who was playing?
Ian McKellen.
No. Oh my God.
When I think of our fifth year, like we were 16, 17 and we were flown over to see Ian McKellen play King Lear.
And for younger listeners, at the Celtic Tiger, it equals Ireland went mad.
We lost it.
We completely
lost it.
Completely high in our own supply, and no one knew what the hell we were doing necessarily, because we were at some party for some. Not everybody, but you get the idea. So you went to see Ian McKellen as King Lear for the crack with Dustin Hoffman in the audience. And
even still, Mr. Murphy's performance was better.
Lovely.
And yeah, he taught classical studies as well. And again, he'd be leaping up and down.
Well, he was probably stabbing Caesar in the back as Brutus and doing the whole reenactments of this sort of thing.
Yeah. So sorry, just to your point, that it's so important to get just a
great teacher to teach. Well, that brings us to the question I like to ask is about the reading when you were a child.
Yes.
Did you have nighttime reading the way a lot of the very young generation now have, in a way that not all of us would have had once upon a time, but it seems to be part of the contract now.
Yes.
With kids, that you must read to them every night. Were you read to, or did you have a book beside you, or was it?
I was read to definitely when I was quite young, and then I shared a bedroom with Alva, so she would read to me.
Cute.
Yeah, and then my main memories of reading, Ryan, are probably they definitely are summertime. So my mom, like, just a phenomenal mom in so many ways. But when I think about summer times, so my parents are both from Clare.
Yeah.
So my dad's from Doolin and my mom's from Ballyvaughan, Bell Harbour, smaller part of Ballyvaughan. And we used to spend our summers in Doolin or on the Aran Islands in Inisheer.
Beautiful.
So Inisheer was like heaven, complete and utter heaven for us as kids, because it's so small, the smallest island. We were allowed run riot, down to the beach, knitting classes, baking scones. It was heaven.
Beautiful. And very light touch parental regulation for whatever reason. But it was great. No, but that was a good thing.
Yes.
Now it's like, where are you going? How long? And GPS in your neck. So that was lovely.
Yes. And then we would do a stint in Doolin, and then if the weather was good, we'd go to Lahinch. We'd do the Alwy Caves. If the weather was bad, my mom just, and sorry, my dad as well, but he would be in Dublin during the week working, and then he'd come down at the weekends. And if the weather was bad, one of the things she'd do would be to bring us to the bookshop in Lahinch and say, pick a book. And so, will this bring us nicely on to my first choice?
You know it will.
Was that a good segue?
It's a beautiful segue. And this is the book from your childhood. You're touching a book there very fondly by an author who I've had the pleasure to interview before, and a book that had a huge presence in my house because of my own daughters. Yeah. So I totally understand where you're going with this. Why don't you introduce us to book one of your choices today?
Book one is Lola Rose by Jacqueline Wilson.
Amazing.
Illustrated by Nick Sharratt. We must not underestimate the importance of Nick Sharratt.
Critical.
Those illustrations.
Yeah, iconic, yeah.
So iconic and just so synonymous with her.
Like Quentin Blake and Roald Dahl, so often, and same with the Gruffalo, the author and the artist. But for your generation, I think that those covers will always follow you.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I remember it was probably the summer that I was maybe 11, 10 maybe, and I was allowed to get this in the bookshop in Lahinch. And I remember starting it, and I couldn't believe that I was allowed to read it at that age. And I was allowed. I mean,
What was sorry, because I don't know this story in terms of who she is.
So, Lola. So Lola Rose is the name that she changes to. Yeah. So her name is Janie in it. And basically her mum is in a relationship where domestic violence is happening all the time. So they decide to run away, her and her little brother, Kenny. And they changed their names. But it was the first time that from a place of total privilege in terms of feeling safe as a child, it was the first time I ever realised or was exposed to unsafe family environment. And I remember being really scared reading it, but not being able to put it down.
Yes.
And so it reminds me of feeling like I wasn't a kid anymore. I was kind of allowed to start grow up a little bit.
Yes, yeah.
Because I was allowed to read it, and there was, and then there's like breast cancers. The mom gets breast cancer at one point, and all the stress around that, and her losing her hair, and this, and it's beautiful because she changes her name to this gorgeous name, Lola Rose. And so the excitement around that and this whole adventure and the way it's written is like, it is a big adventure for them as kids, but underneath it all, there's the sadness.
I mean, that is the skill, I think, that Jacqueline Wilson brings to books, because you think, oh, they look like nice, and it's like almost like a cartoon cover. That, as you say, Nick Sharrett's illustrations are cartoony, but actually, she was a devil for really depressing storylines.
Totally.
Like the kid with half a head and the mother with with 6 hands, and how is she going to cope? There was always this, and and you always wondered, why are kids so drawn in their bazillions to these books? But I think you've just beautifully articulated that by saying, you're on the cusp of adulthood, sort of.
Yeah.
You'd come from a very lovely childhood of your own. So you were exhilarated, fascinated, moved.
Yes.
And also educated.
Yeah.
And maybe even gave you a certain empathy.
Totally.
Would that be fair to say?
Without a doubt. And empathy and yeah, that then stood to me because I remember going into school then in September and being like, hang on a second.
It could be anyone.
It could be anyone in my class. Yeah. And that feeling of like, oh God, that does actually happen. And it's not just in movies and not in books.
Yes.
It could be any of the girls I go to school with. And definitely, empathy then for me, I suppose, was amplified. And I think that's something that I've held on to. And I think that's why, not to toot my own flute, Ryan, but the Laughs of Your Life as a podcast, I think people feel comfortable with me. I remember Greg O'Shea, for example, Love Island fame.
Yes.
He came on the podcast. He spoke about having suicidal thoughts at one point.
Yes.
And he didn't plan on talking about that. And he was like, you and your empathetic face.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And, I'll chime in. I've been on your podcast twice. And you do have that great skill, because you think, the laughs of my life, and then that happened, and then that happened, and you just find yourself going, why am I unraveling? But it is. But you do get this, and we bring it back to the books.
Yeah.
That you're kind of reading this and thinking, well, there must be something more to it. It can't just be.
Yeah.
Just La La Land for people. As a matter of interest, did you read more Jacqueline Wilson?
Oh, yes.
Did you kind of get into her then as your thing?
Totally.
For a while anyway.
And again, Nick Sharrett really to thank for that. The way the books would look, it was you'd be just so drawn to them.
Let's move to book 2, which is The Life Changer. I really want to know what book changed your life. I think this is a hard question to ask anyone, because A, there's so many books, and B, how do you know if a book has changed your life? Like, it is a hard question. So I don't know how much thought you could give this or how you alighted on your choice, but you're holding it here in front of us. I'm dying to hear it.
Yes. So Your One Wild and Precious Life by Dr. Maureen Gaffney.
Oh, yes.
Is what I've decided to go with.
Famous psychologist here in Ireland, yeah.
Famous psychologist here in Ireland. A lot of my stories that I've been telling you relate back to spending time with my family. But in my late teens, early 20s, if I'd be in the car with my dad or my mom, they'd be listening to Marion Finucane at the weekend often. God rest her soul.
Yes,
a
every
legend,
Saturday
an icon.
and Sunday morning.
Yes. And Dr. Maureen Gaffney was a staple on her show. She used to be the person that would be the, I suppose, resident psychologist. And I remember passively listening to her when I'd be in the car and just thinking, she knows, I think she knows what she's on about. She really seems to, as in, at that age, none of it really applied to me, what I was listening to, or I didn't feel like it did. But I really admired her and thought she was deadly. And then later in life, in my 20s, I think over the past definitely 10 years, self-help, wellness, that industry, that world.
And it is an industry.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Has really, taken off. And for the right reasons in many ways, but then it can be like, it's everywhere and it's hard to know what to listen to or what to.
A lot of noise.
A lot of noise. Yeah. And on Instagram as well. Every 5 seconds you see an inspirational quote or a way that you should be living that you're not living, and it makes you feel awful. And it's like, what? Oh God, it's too much. I don't like green juices. Stop telling me to drink them. Yeah. Or I don't, I can't get 8 hours sleep, so stop making me feel bad for not being able to. So was it 2 years ago? It was 2 years ago she released, Dr. Maureen Gaffney released Your One Wild and Precious Life.
Yes.
An inspiring guide to becoming your best self at any age. And I said, I'm going to read that and see how I go. And it was at a time where I suppose I needed it. Like when I think back on I'm 31 now, but when I think back on a lot of my 20s, particularly my late 20s, I didn't really have a lot of it I didn't have it together personally in many ways.
Why?
I think I have a good work ethic and I am driven. Mm-hmm. And I'm proud to say that now. because I think you can shy away from complimenting yourself. But I do. And it's been, I suppose, 8 years now for me of media, radio, TV, podcasting, social media, and it's all gone well and is going, thank God, touch wood, in the right direction. And I put so much emphasis on that for the right reasons, but I think I neglected myself a bit, personally, and also just trying to act like I had it all together and every box ticked with relationships, and probably being in relationships I didn't necessarily think or know were long term, but just doing it for the sake of it because that's what you do and you give it a go, and it doesn't matter there and that you know it's not right, just stay there. So I remember getting this book at that time to be like, well, this helped me now, and it definitely did. She goes through, I think, to actually go to read a book from an actual psychologist is very different to someone who, you know, sees themselves as a wellness guru.
Very well said, I think.
You know?
I get the sense that you're suggesting there's a professionalism to
Exactly.
Dr. Gaffney
Exactly.
telling you or advising. And there's also, she's been around a few years, and I say that with great respect.
Yeah.
I think that helps. I mean, when somebody's of an age who's been doing this for decades,
Yeah.
as opposed to, you know, fresh on the job, which we all have to be at some stage in our
Yes.
lives. So what did this book do for you? So you don't sound like that time that you went through was too distressing. It sounds like it was more confusing.
Yeah, well, distressing as well in my own time. I suppose I didn't open up a whole lot to anyone around me, but I just was under pressure to figure out what I actually wanted versus what I thought I wanted versus what I thought people expected of me.
Yes.
And I suppose, again, like, no one put that pressure on me but myself.
Yes.
You know, my sisters were both married and, you know, having babies. And you kind of go, oh God, I should be trying to get on that track as well. But doing it for reasons that weren't right. And so from this made me feel very normal.
That's a lovely, lovely thing to put as the blurb on the back as a quote from you. I would steal that immediately if I was book publishers.
Yeah.
How did it make you feel normal? I mean, that's what a lovely compliment to pay to a book.
I mean, she goes through all of the chapters of life. Like, literally chronologically how life goes and the different things that you want from life, expect from life,
Yes.
get from life, don't get from life at different ages, and how it makes you feel. And when I landed on the chapter of like my stage of life, it just made me go, okay, I can breathe. Like, it's okay that I don't have it figured out. It's okay that I don't necessarily want to or need to open up to anyone about, you know, the pressure I feel or that I'm putting on myself to live the way, you know, society or people around me might be expecting me to live. And even if I don't figure it out in this decade, it will all come together if I just trust the process of actually listening to my gut. I think I had a real problem in my 20s with listening to my gut. And it never sends you the wrong way.
I agree with you. But as you're talking about how you read that chapter, I'm sensing in this small studio space the relief lifting from my shoulders, because you clearly had a burden lifted from yours.
Totally.
And going, so there are no hard and fast rules as to how one should live one's life, because we are also completely individual. No, but really,
totally.
I mean, no one can make tea for you.
That's it.
It's such a personal thing: the color, the shade, the depth, the sugar.
Yeah,
you know, and that's your life. We are all cups of tea, and no one can work that for us.
No one can do it, and you know, and around that time as well, my dad, again, like he's very white. He's very. I think my mom and dad are very well met, because my mom is very gets shit done, basically.
Yes.
My dad is more sits back and goes, let's just look at the bigger picture. So they keep each other in check. He'll bring perspective to things.
Are we talking about a dreamer and a doer?
Yes.
Okay.
A dreamer and a doer. I mean, my dad is still a doer, but he
likes to dream.
He likes to dream. And I remember talking to him at that time and being like, you know, what am I going to do? The relationship I'm currently in, I know I don't want to be in. I don't know how to end it. It's very scary. Like, you know, when people say like, but sure, if you're not happy, end it. There's so much more to it than that.
That's a very glib way of saying it. And you often hear, you know, you mentioned domestic violence there earlier on with Jacqueline Wilson, that book, your first book you chose.
Why didn't you just leave?
Why don't you just? I remember when I was presenting radio programs in Ireland, particularly, we'd have phases of the show where we talked about domestic violence, and women would write in to say what was happening to them, and some men. And the reality is then people would write in and say, you just need to get out. They meant well.
Of course.
But try it sometime to
Impossible.
paraphrase,
Next to impossible, I would
Next to
say.
impossible. So sorry, go back to...
This is on a... Yeah.
Yeah, that was on a different level, but you were saying, so you were kind of maybe in a relationship and saying, and people said, just get out. To follow your gut. And you go, well, you know, I don't want to hurt people.
Yeah, that's
I don't
it.
wanna, and it's people around people.
Yeah.
And, you know.
It's the fam... It's, oh, God. And it can just be such a mess. And you can blame yourself.
And it's Christmas Eve.
And their birthday. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you do the whole like, oh God, you know, how am I going to... But sorry, I remember saying it to my dad and being like, what am I going to do? And he was like, and I've said this a few times, I've said this publicly before, but it's the best advice I've ever, I think, been given by him or anyone. He just turned to me. I thought I'd get sympathy from him. And he was like, Doireann, you do realise no one gives a about you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Garrihy.
I was like, sorry, what? He was like, I was like, Dad, you can't say that. What? He was like, outside of me, your mom, and your two sisters, and maybe one best friend. So you may as well suit yourself because they're all, you might think they're thinking about you. They're not.
Yes.
They're thinking about themselves.
And their own lives.
Their own lives, their
troubles.
own relationships, their own career.
Well said.
You know what I mean?
I mean, it was a diplomatic, horror show of an approach, but it was absolutely paternally beautiful.
Beautiful. And people have, and I shared it before on Instagram, and still, that was probably 2017, 2018. Still, people write to me. I could get at least a message a month from someone saying, hi, Doireann, I just want you to know, back when I heard, you know, when you shared that your dad's bit of advice, I left my job or I left my relationship or I decided to move back to Ireland when I was pretending I was happy in Australia or I was, whatever it might be. I have to do what's right for me because everyone else is just...
Getting on with their thing.
Getting on with their thing.
Their thing. So after that conversation and that advice corner, did you make massive decisions?
Oh, of course not. I waited 2 years.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. No, I did, but not immediately.
Not immediately.
You know,
well, you had to process it. And,
exactly.
You know. So this is a combination of Maureen Gaffney's book, your one wild
and precious
life, which is so eloquent, and beautiful, and then your dad's very different approach, and yet from both of these avenues came a route out of your own unhappiness.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And
Amazing.
it's not easy. They say that women, you know that they say women are checked out of a relationship a year before they might end it.
Oh, I haven't heard. You can't just say that about every woman that ever lived.
I'm telling you right. I'm not saying it applied to me, but they say on average.
A year
before they end it, they're gone.
So what are they doing for the year that they're gone?
Mentally checking out, figuring out what they're going to do, how they're going to break it to what person at what time, living situation, you know, making sure they might have a holiday lined up so they can go to Ibiza with the girlos. Whatever it might be, it's generally it's a year mentally checked out, not physically.
You've made a lot of men listening to this podcast very, very nervous, and they will be questioning. They will be questioning every scintilla of their relationship.
Yeah.
Are you checked in?
Wait a second, she hasn't texted me back in 16 minutes.
No, she's checking out. She's getting another key cut. This is not good. Okay, that is a fascinating lesson to learn.
Yeah.
It's horrific, but I think it's educational and it's important that we know that. And now we move on to the book that made you cry, and that could have made you cry laughing or cry upset. Like it's not too worrisome in that regard. I like to know if you're a crier by nature, or how does that work?
Yes, I am.
Okay, what
Big cry
generally
baby.
Can I ask you what makes you cry most?
Or
when are you most moved to tears?
When am I most moved to tears?
Is it watching a movie? Is it having a row? Is it laughing at somebody's comments, or is it a sad thing that you saw on the news, or is it a combination of all of these things?
To be honest, stress.
Yeah.
When I get stressed, I ring my mom and have a good cry.
Wow.
And she'll know it's coming. As in, she'll know when she answers the phone what's about to come, and she'll put things aside and go on, what is it? And I'm like, and it's this, and it's that, and I did this, and then this happened, and this happened. And sometimes that's all I need is 15 minutes of that. And it could be anything. It could be life, could be work, could be, yes, stress. I would have a good cry. It's a therapy for sure.
If I may, I described being a dad as, and a mum, of course, as being the harbour and the kids are the little boats.
Now, hang on. You did harbour like this.
It's two
That's
arms.
Dunleary.
Well, that is Dunleary Harbour.
It's
but East and West Pier. But let's say that.
Gorgeous.
There's two arms and the children are the little boats, and then they hit 18 and the boats go out to the sea, to the ocean. And you stop being an arm in the harbour, you become the lighthouse. And the light goes and we're always there. And you can just bring the boat back if you need to. And you've just described that phone call, which I've been on the receiving end of, not very often. But when you do, I think it must be lovely to have that at the other end. You're growing up. You could make that phone call today at the age you are, and you could have made it last week for all I know.
Yeah.
But you need the lighthouse to beam that light out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You're still drawn back to it.
Oh, like all the time. I'm absolutely blessed. And I think since I've hit 30, I've really checked into this mode of, you do realise mum and dad aren't going to be here forever.
Don't say that.
No,
I know people
but it's
think
in a
that.
good way. It's a reminder, it's a kick up the arse to go, flaws and all. And because they can, of course, parents can drive you mad as well.
I can only imagine how many times I've seen phones looked at, pocketed.
Yeah. Sorry, Mom, I was on silent. I absolutely wasn't on silent.
Who's that? Yeah, no, nothing. It was my dad. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so equally they can drive you mad, but I think as well, because myself and my two sisters have always been very close to our parents.
Yeah.
I'd say us growing older and my parents realising we don't need them anymore was quite hard for them.
Yeah.
But as you say, it's times like that. That's irreplaceable. You can't replace that relationship or that connection or that crutch. Being able to call them like that. So sorry.
Your parents are quite young though, aren't they? I mean,
They are, my dad
He says, it's all relative, isn't it?
My dad is 65 this year.
Shapers.
And my mum's 63 this year.
Children. I mean, as far as I'm concerned. But so your worries are, I hope, limited.
Oh yeah, of course. Fit as
sense.
fiddles. And my dad does the full NCT every year. He's absolutely grand. My mom's like, your father's gone in for the NCT again. Not a fucking bother on him. I don't know why he's gone in.
Go out of that with your
He
NCT.
just sees it as a green light to go back on the pints, the next day.
But he's right to do that. I mean, let's have a little men's health moment.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
he's dead right. Not many men do that.
No.
So I actually kudos to him for that.
Yeah.
Your third book, the book that makes you cry. I'm intrigued. It's here.
Yes.
It's pink. It's one of the great Irish writers of our generation. So
Can we
let's
have a
talk
moment
about
for
it.
how fab my nails look since I got engaged?
Well, I mean, is that a ring I see before me? So you got engaged last year, and congratulations to you on that.
Yeah, I was just clicking my nails on the book, and I just spotted.
What am I admiring? The ring or the nails?
Bit of both.
The nails are strangely complementary to the book cover.
They actually are.
And they are fabulous. I mean, I wouldn't have a clue, but I'm just going to say, you're great.
Sorry, okay. Let's get back
Your
to
third book.
My third book, I have the book in my hands, but actually, I listened to this as an audiobook.
Great.
And I'm so glad I did. Because Marion Keyes herself narrates Rachel's Holiday.
Oh, I love when an author reads their own book.
She sort of has that lovely little gentle voice.
She does.
And it's so lovely to listen to.
Yeah.
Rachel.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly that. And with that emphasis.
Yeah.
Why is everybody worried about me moving home from New York? I don't need to go into rehab.
That could be the line, and in a few chapters, no doubt, because this is what this book is about.
Yes.
Why is this book making you cry?
Like cry laughing.
Great.
Amazingly, but cry. There's just. It's really sad in many ways.
Give us a rough gist of it.
Okay, so she
not the whole thing.
She lived the dream in New York.
Yeah.
And she finds herself back in Ireland. Rachel Walsh. Now this is actually a big
character in Marion's canon.
Yes, but you don't have to. It's standalone. You don't have to know Watermelon or any of the others. So she is back from New York and she is going into rehab because it's been established that she definitely has an addiction problem. It's narrated by Rachel. It's Rachel's voice, and so it's very funny. It's very funny and sad at the same time because you realise throughout the book, at the start, she doesn't think she really needs it that much.
Yes.
But she goes, okay, fine. She thinks rehab is going to be jacuzzis and a spa and rock and roll people that you hear who have gone into rehab.
Yes, like the Priory or something.
Exactly. Yeah. And she goes into the cloisters and it's a very different place to that. And so it's all about her experience there. It's the relationships that she has, through her addiction messed up. Her boyfriend being one, Luke. The characters in rehab. It's just to listen to Marion Keyes. It was amazing. It was probably a year and a half ago I listened to it because actually again Rachel was coming out, the sequel to this.
Yes.
And so I wanted to have a listen to that before that came out. I actually still haven't got around to listening to it again. I'll get there, Ryan.
You'll get there.
I promise you, I'll do that now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just I think I loved it so much because the way she explains her way out of situations, or justifies her behaviours, we can all see ourselves in a bit of that.
Yeah.
A bit of that in ourselves.
Yes, I understand.
And then I suppose I had only listened to it about 6 months before I met Mark.
Okay. Do you want to introduce us to Mark in that sense?
I'll introduce you to Mark. So I met my now fiance, Mark, in October 2022.
Right.
And he, at that stage, was a year in recovery he's an alcoholic. And they say, the program that he follows, he follows a 12-step program. And the general advice is to not meet someone until you've at least a year of sobriety. So along came me.
Well, now
Very strange.
I feel a Marion Keyes novel coming on here.
Do you?
It's very good.
So we met then, and yeah, I had no idea he was in recovery.
How'd you meet?
We met via Instagram, but his cousin, John, is a producer in 2FM.
Yes.
So I was on air one morning and John was producing us, and he said, I'm going to my cousin's comedy gig tonight. So he's a comedian, Mark.
Yes.
I'm going to his comedy gig tonight. I was like, who's your cousin? He said, Mark Meegan. I was like, that name rings a bell. Now, Mark slagged me about this. He's like, you knew exactly who I was. Like, that's really weird.
Meegan. I wonder is that the guy I've been creeping on for the last 6 weeks? Might be him. Could be a different Mark Meegan. Go on.
No, I swear on my life. So basically, Mark was one of the original viral Irish Facebook video people.
Okay.
So he's from South Dublin. He's a quintessential South Dublin guy. And so he used to do this bit about, going out, and basically his girlfriend had broken his heart, and he used to do these funny videos about it on Facebook. So I remembered him from probably 6 or 7 years previous. And so genuinely it kind of sparked this. I was like, what's that guy up to these days? I didn't realise he was doing like stand-up or, shows. So anyway, I asked John about it, and he said, yeah, he's a run of shows on this week. So I followed Mark on Instagram. He followed me back.
This is where it begins.
I may have sent the first DM. Okay, I can admit to that now because we're engaged. I wouldn't have admitted that at the start.
What was the nature of that DM? I just want to take a note. What was the nature? What did you say in it? I just think if this ends up in the Garda investigate. So what did you say?
It wasn't an aubergine emoji or anything.
Oh, forget it. Forget it. You'd have to drag it down there, wouldn't you?
So he
You sidestepped the question. What did you write to him?
Okay, so he does these roasts on Instagram where he'll pick a topic and roast it.
Yes.
So he was doing that. I can't even remember what the topic was. I think it was the roast of Irish engagements or something.
Irony.
And there was one bit in particular that was absolutely... Oh no, sorry. I remember exactly what it was. I remember.
We got there.
It was the roast of, I think, South Dublin holiday makers.
Lovely.
Right? So it was all about the Valta Laubos. The people who do the Portugal, but like they also see their neighbours, like literally. So they go on holidays, but they meet up on the holiday. That kind of thing. And then there was the Irish holiday makers. And it was a joke to do with...
Oh my God. She's in love.
South Dublin families who have holiday homes.
Yes.
And if anyone dares to call it a caravan, that they're like, it's not a caravan. There's no wheels.
In Ballyconneely. Yeah, I hear you, yeah.
And it's like, okay, relax, mate. It's not that big a deal, right? So he made this joke and I just thought it was so funny. So I replied, laughy emojis. That's all I sent.
Okay.
And then he replied to me and then we struck up conversation. He asked for my number. He took it to WhatsApp. This is essential. This is
you've got to
important.
migrate to WhatsApp.
These are the important details, right?
Okay.
So we moved it to WhatsApp and he sent me a voice note. So from the get-go, he wasn't afraid to send a voice note because that can be scary,
Yeah, it's important to get that right. To get the tone right and everything right.
Tone right.
But he did.
Yep.
So did you go to the gig before you met him?
I went to the gig.
Yeah.
So it's all a very long story. So I went to the gig on my own. But like that's brazen.
That is brazen.
Isn't it? So anyway, went... Extremely funny.
Yep.
Really enjoyed it. I then thought, okay, I've gone to the gig and I've met him briefly. He'll text me again later on because we've been texting all week.
Nothing,
Ryan.
Okay, now I'm just running. The Iceman cometh. Now, what are we to do with him?
Over my dead body was I going to text him?
Yeah.
So 10 days go by and I couldn't understand it because we clicked instantly. We got on so great. And so Mark now calls this Cold War, the 10 days where we didn't speak.
So Reagan and Gorbachev, right, are looking at each other over a phone.
We
and
regularly
no one's
refer to
blinking.
it. She's like, do you remember during Cold War, blah, blah, blah.
So 10 days. I'm trying to know how you broke the...
Gotubin. We have a mutual friend, James
Gotubin.
Kavanagh.
Yeah.
The
James
icon
Kavanagh.
that is.
Another social...
Yes, media personality,
yeah.
legend, TV presenter.
Yeah, lovely fella too, yeah.
Yes. He gets in touch with me. He's like, Doireann, I just want you to know, Mark Megan has reached out to me. He can't understand why you haven't texted him after the gig. There were other details. He sent me like a picture and I was like, I'm not getting back to this picture.
what?
Send me a nice...
Okay, no, I'm joking. Keep going. Sorry.
He sent me a picture that was to do with a joke we'd spoken about earlier in the week.
thank
So he
God
was
for that.
trying.
Yeah, okay. No, that's so
so he
good.
was trying to get the conversation going again, and I was like, "Try harder. Send me an actual text." So I was just like, "No, I'm not dealing with this. He can try a little bit harder." So James said, "Mark Megan wants to know why you haven't got back to him. Can I give him the green light to get in touch with you, or are you totally done with him? What is going on here?" So James went back to Mark and said, "Yes, she absolutely wants to hear from you, and she's wondering why she hasn't heard from you properly." So he got on to me and said, "Consider this a romantic olive branch. I'm really sorry. There's been a massive misunderstanding here. I just thought you didn't want to hear from me because you didn't respond to the photo I sent you." So I said, "Cool, let's go for a walk tonight." He was like, "Absolutely not. I'm breaking it. I don't want to meet you. I don't want to meet you today."
Get away.
I swear to God.
He wasn't.
It was midweek. He was like, "I'm not ready. No. Let's do something at the weekend."
Okay.
So we went for a lovely walk. Do you want to know all this detail?
I really do.
Okay.
Like I'm all in. I'm on episode 3 of your Netflix romantic...
Box set.
Yeah.
So we met for a walk in Dunleary. He was living in Dunleary at the time.
Yeah.
And we did, you'll know that area.
I know
We went
well.
up through Glasstool
Yeah.
and up towards Killiney.
Yeah.
Went into Dalkey Village, had a bit of grub, walked back to the car. And I knew I loved him.
Wow. Did you kiss him?
He didn't know.
Bit early.
Bit early.
Steady now.
Bit early, but as soon as we left, he was like, I brained it.
Yeah.
He texted me, he was like, I should have kissed you.
Because you knew.
Yeah, I knew. And
That is really nice. I like that. That's kind of goosebumpy, I have to say. No, in
Is
seriousness.
it?
Yeah. That brought me there.
Did
I
it?
thought, yeah, that lovely post-walk departure where you're both going, I wish
Yeah.
I wasn't leaving this person.
It was normal people vibes.
Wow.
For a moment. But then, yeah. So,
That's really lovely. I mean, in all sincerity, I mean, we can have the crack about it and all, but
yeah,
that's so meaningful. And you obviously got the sense this is it.
this
you
is
know?
it.
And this, I'm sorry to bring it back, but this does come back to your third
Yes, of
choice
course.
of
Yeah,
book,
yeah.
only on the basis that,
Of course.
you know, you've described recovery, you've described alcoholism,
Yeah.
you've described listening to Marion reading her own book, Marion Keyes reading
Yeah.
Rachel's Holiday. And Mark came into the conversation pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about
Yes.
why or how or what's the
I suppose so when we met, yeah, he was sober a year. So he lived in London for 10 years. He came home to Ireland during COVID. He had worked for the BBC for a while. And so I obviously wasn't around when he first went into recovery. But getting to know him from the get-go in sobriety, he says, not to be too, oh God, I keep saying not to be too cringe about it, and then I am cringe. But he says that when we met, it was the first time he didn't feel like an alcoholic.
Okay.
And so that's obviously a good sign for him.
Of course.
And for me, it has just been, he often asks, or apparently there's a saying within the program he does, you know, if you want to know how your recovery is going, ask your partner. You know, if someone wants to know how you're getting on in recovery or in sobriety, ask your partner, because they're the person who's the closest to you.
Reflection almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm just in awe of him. I'm in awe of the way he has gone about it. I mean, I've never been close to someone who's in recovery before. I have family members
that you know of. I think that we every day
Totally.
are probably sitting beside people at work or on the bus who quietly slip away for an hour to a meeting, as they call them.
completely.
And, you know, that person, it's back to your Jacqueline Wilson, the learning empathy. You mentioned family. There isn't an Irish family who isn't touched by this addiction. And very often either it's functioning
Yeah.
or it's not functioning. And therefore they have to try and, you know, struggle. But they internalize it because much like we talked about sex before and
Yeah.
the birds and the bees,
Yeah.
equally with addiction in Ireland for too long, not discussed. So to hear you
100%.
talk so openly, it gives me great faith for the next generation, actually. And then
Yeah.
younger again. Please talk. Isn't that it? I mean,
Without
we're back
a
to Maureen
doubt.
Gaffney. Actually, all your books, funnily enough, have a beautiful thread about, you know, learning the empathy, understanding how to deal with it all, and then coming full circle to your own life and living with addiction
Completely.
and the struggles that lie therein.
Yeah.
What a lovely
Yeah.
trilogy of books you've chosen, actually.
But it's so true what you say that I know of. And you know, often we would go for a walk around Dunleary when we first met.
Yeah.
We'd go for walks and he'd give a head nod to someone.
Yeah.
And I'd wonder how he knew them, and he wouldn't say, but
Yes.
I'd know. And it is every walk of life. It is every person,
Oh, well, I
every
mean,
age, every
Addiction doesn't care how much you
No.
earn or how little you earn or
No.
where you went to school.
yeah.
It'll get you if it wants to.
Yeah.
My dad was a psychiatrist in John of God's, and he helped people with addiction issues. And very often to this day, people say to me, I knew your father. And there's an understanding. I'd have to sometimes say, which side of the desk were you on? You know, were you
Really?
a
Oh my
colleague or a
gosh, wow.
patient?
Yeah.
And I hear great stories about people who've recovered because of him. And, you know, it is the greatest win for somebody to come through an addiction. It has to be
100%.
one of the
Oh.
greatest wins. I mean,
Without a doubt. And it's one day at a time, and it's
yeah.
you know, it is that thing of as soon as you think you're recovered, you might be in trouble. It's a complete work in progress, for want of a better description. You know,
Yeah.
it's like every day he's grateful for, you know, another day of working at it and working his program
And clarity.
and talking
Yeah,
again
and
to
talking.
to like-minded people and people who are in similar situations. And again, as I said before, you know, totally different backgrounds, different ages, different genders, different races, whatever it might be. It's an amazing community. And I'm in awe of him. And even, like, you know, he went into recovery at the age of 30. And I think at his age and stage in life, he could have kind of gone, I'll sort it out in 10
Yeah,
years.
I'll muddle through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the difference, and I truly believe we wouldn't be together if he was drinking when we met. And he believes it too.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a reason that we met when we did and the way we did.
I love that story. And I love your happiness. I'm very happy for you because you've described with you know, searing honesty the struggle of trying to figure it all out.
Yeah.
And you know, whether it was cosmic or your own choice and reason, you've got there in many respects. And that's why I want to conclude with our final question of our chat today.
Can I give a shameless plug before we move on?
Of course you can.
Mark's written a book.
Oh, has he?
Yes.
Tell me.
I'll read that. Ron.
You read that one? Well, you will, because you want to save your relationship, don't you?
Absolutely.
And has it got a title or?
Yes. This is not a self-help book.
Oh, very good.
And then the kind of small bit, but it might help you.
Okay. What a great achievement.
Yeah. I mean,
I look forward to reading that.
Yeah, like if I say so myself, and I know I'm biased, he's gifted when it comes to. My mom is always in stitches at the way he describes things, like his
Yeah.
use of language. Like he's just way more.
He's a storyteller,
He's a
obviously.
complete
Yeah.
storyteller and funny. So the book is about recovery, but there's a lot of humor in it. And it's the whole premise of it is he hasn't got it figured out, but he's trying to figure it out. And it might help you.
Well, you know, he's
Yeah.
got it. He's got it right. And we've talked about finding darkness we've talked about finding humor in dark places, and that's what he's done with that book. So congratulations to him for that.
Yes.
We're now going to talk about a totally fictitious book, which
Yes.
is the name of the autobiography you have yet to write.
Yes.
I suspect one will come in due course. I don't know in what shape or form
God.
it'll take Doireann Garrihy, but it's the title I would like to hear and the reason for it. Please.
Okay. Apparently, when I spoke to your researcher, people have struggled with this and gone, oh God, what would I? But I had my answer straight away.
Good.
My book would be The Laughs of My Life.
Well, now.
Yes.
I feel a podcast title coming on. Okay, so you've chosen the name of your podcast.
Yeah. So
the book title is?
The Laughs of My Life.
Yes, okay.
So the podcast is The Laughs of Your Life.
Your Life,
And so
sorry.
it's
I see the nuance there.
Yes.
The Laughs of My Life. So it's a little twist on your own podcast title.
a little twist.
Go on, talk to me about
Well,
it.
since season 1, people have said to me, what would be your answers
things,
to the
yeah,
questions?
yes,
and
yes.
I toyed with the idea because my very first guest was Ian Dempsey.
Yeah.
So at one point I was like, I wonder for the season finale of whatever season, would I ask Ian to ask me the questions?
Yes.
Thought that might be a nice idea. Thought maybe if I did a live show, I could have someone on to ask me the questions, or for me to just, do the answers myself. But I don't know if I think I have a lot of answers to each of the questions. So I think if I were to write a book, the title would be The Laughs of My Life.
Great idea.
And because it is kind of, the questions that I have in my podcast are somewhat chronological, because it's your first memory of laughter, the first time you felt laughed at, which is generally teenage years that people go with. The moment if you didn't laugh, you cry, your no laughing matter moment. And I think I just think it would be a nice way to write a book.
Yeah,
Because I know the structure so well. And I have thought about what my answers would be, but I just haven't revealed them.
I love that. And I'm not going to ask you to reveal them today because that's for the book. And I love that. It's very smart. And it's a book that if I was a publisher listening to this podcast, I'd be saying, sign her up. We got one for Christmas
God.
2024. No, it's ready to go. I love talking to you. We've a really easy rapport always. It's so lovely. And we can go anywhere with their conversations and it's just so lovely. And I really appreciate you coming in today. I've really enjoyed your 3 choices. And I love that you said to me only an hour ago before we started talking, I'm not a reader. I don't want to get involved. This, as you can gather, is not a podcast for readers. It's not exclusive. It's just for people who are interested in people and life. And, and you are one of those people. And I love talking to you. Every happiness. You seem so happy.
I am.
It seems like you've kind of got somewhere where you needed to be, and I'm really happy for you. So, thanks for being with us. Let's do it again in some shape or form.
100%. In London.
In London. London. Yes. Where I'm an active waiter to a lot of people now. Otherwise, working on the radio occasionally. Doireann Garrihy, peace and love, and lovely to see you.
Ryan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So here's this week's Ryan Recommends, brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. Robert Galbraith, The Cuckoo's Calling. This is J.K. Rowling's alter ego, if you like, pseudonym. And this deals with Strike as our main character here. He's a very, very unconventional detective, and his, I don't like calling her this, but I will for the purpose of this review, sidekick Robin. And it's London. It's very modern. So you're on the Tottenham Court Road, or there's a model falls from a balcony in Mayfair, or they're chasing people around Soho. So if you know London, or if you like London, or if you live in London, you're going to love this because you know all the tube stations, you know where all the action is, but it's written really well. This is the kind of book that if you're going away for a week, you're going, I must bring a Strike, because you get really into it. You know, that way you get stuck into a series. Some people might have liked Harry Potter once upon a time, and now they're grown up and they want to read something else. So really go for this. Start at the beginning, find the nature of the series, and then get stuck in. I think you're going to love it. The Strike series, magnificent. All right, and this book and all the books we discuss on this episode of our podcast are available now in your local Eason store, or order them online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired.